Welcome to y'all family to another episode of The Everyday Investor. Today we have a very special guest with us. Please help me welcome Taylor Weaver. How's it going, Taylor?
It's going well, man. Going well. Glad to have you here in my basement. You got me all dressed up on a Saturday.
No, for sure. Hey, this is a very special day for a lot of different reasons because not only is this the first in-person interview that we have done, but also you are the first reoccurring guest. So, before we did the video interview and you talked about everything that you're doing from being a mergers and acquisitions attorney. You are, doing things in the cannabis industry. You are, have fitness studios across the country. And the last thing that you had talked about was this electric vehicle space that you have broken into. And we kind of left the interview with that. So this time around, I understand that that company has took leaps and bounds. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the current status, the current state of the company, where you guys are. Again, from my understanding, you guys are doing some really big things with the company. So I guess with all that being said, what made you get off into the electric vehicle space? Because again, as I talked about earlier, you're doing so much things between being an attorney, having gyms, being in the cannabis industry. So what made you say, okay, I want to also do this electric vehicle thing?
Yeah, and I'd always say that, with everything that I'm doing, I'm always trying to figure out a way to solve a need.
Okay.
Because you figure out a way to solve a need, dollars will follow.
Absolutely.
And even better if you're doing something that you're passionate with, or if you have a skill set that, you can put directly towards whatever you're trying to do. So I'd say it started with cannabis. So the cannabis industry, we were trying to put an entire electric fleet of cars, doing delivery across the state of Massachusetts. And so, being the founder, one of the co-founders, I'm like, hey, let me go ahead and see what it's going to be like to go on this ride. And so I had probably bought my electric vehicle back in April of last year, maybe March of last year. And so I'm driving around. I'm like, I love this feel. It's quiet. The ride is smooth. It's. I'm not gonna say it's fast because I don't want to get pulled over. But it's a really good feel and it's just an enjoyable experience. But the one thing that hit me, which I didn't realize at the time, is range anxiety. So you're looking at these cars that have, call it anywhere from 250 to, on the high end, if you've got a Lucid, 500, less of a big deal. Right. But then you have production, manufacturing things, but you've got Rivian's 300, but it's still not like a typical gas car, which, if you do a hybrid, you may even get around 450 to 500 miles.
Right.
So I was driving around and I'm looking and I'm like, I finally hit the point where I'm at about 25, 30 miles on my battery. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now it's time to go charge. And, looking around, I'm like, okay, I see a bunch of Shell gas stations, BPs, things like that. But, where do I charge? I had already downloaded the apps. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just start looking at those. So the first one I pull up, I'm like, cool, chargers all over the place. I'm good to go. I drive about 10, 15 minutes, burn about 5 miles on the battery. And I pull up to, basically a cornfield. It wasn't really a cornfield, but there was no stations. And I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, all right, maybe it was just a glitch on the app or something like that. And then I go to the next spot, same thing happens.
Wow.
So now I start to experience what they call range anxiety. And I'm going, oh my gosh, is there anyone that I'm going to be able to, go to charge my car? Or am I going to have to get this thing towed back to my apartment where I was living at the time? And so that immediately was like, okay, if we've got 10 drivers out on the road, 15 drivers out on the road, and each driver has, 10, 20, 30 deliveries left. Let's just take one of them and say that they're on a low battery and they have 20 to 30. How many stations on the application is it going to take for them to go to before they find a station that, number one, actually exists,
right,
and number two, works? And so that's a scary thing to do when you're basing the backbone of your business on an EV fleet.
Okay.
And so, again, how do I solve the need? I reached out to my insurance contact at the time. He was the president of Hub Insurance, great guy. And I was like, hey, who do I contact about putting in electric vehicle charging stations? Because we need some around the state of Massachusetts so that way my drivers can know exactly where to go.
Right. And
he put me in contact with one of the groups that did 90% of the installations on the Northeast. And we started talking. And he said some really great proprietary stuff. And so my number went from, hey, I want 4 of these to give me 40. And then after doing some research, listening to podcasts, reading books, speaking, going to conferences, learning, meeting people, 40 became, let's power the grid.